Hello, my name is Ben Mosier. I'm joined today by Benjamin P. Taylor of RedQuadrant. He and I are both contributors to the Don't Waste the Reboot deck that was recently published by the Yak Collective. Benjamin, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the slides that you contributed. First, you talk about how individual needs can be met by organizations, but in a way that's actually kind of mutually enabling. So could we start there? You mentioned 6 needs, 4 of which we should be thinking about today.
That's well put, Ben. I think you're exactly right. There's a thesis, and I don't hold this particularly strongly as absolutely essential about human nature, but it seems to work quite well in practice, that there are these 6 fundamental human needs, and that how we attend to them determines how productive or unproductive that the results in our organizations are. And what's nice about them is that there's a tension between the two. There's a paradox. So these are dynamic balances that need to be maintained on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so you've got a couple of the needs listed in the deck. And I think the basic way that you're saying that this adds up is that if you start with these 4 individual needs, and you start finding new ways to embody those practices inside the organization, this all adds up to a mutually supportive thing, and this meets the final 2 needs.
Absolutely right. Yeah, the 4 core ones ultimately are certainty and comfort. And in an organizational world, that's about homogenization and stability. Uncertainty and variety, exploration, and so on. That's about differentiation and the ability to adapt. Then the 3rd is love, collection, belonging. And that's something about the individuals coming together in a greater whole. And then significance and uniqueness, our need to be individual and have individuation and autonomy. All of those things you might already be able to think can either destroy an organization or redeem it. Each of those 4 things, without its complementary pair, is likely to make the organization in some way pathological. However, if we can get the right dynamic balance right for individuals and for the whole and for subgroups and all the rest, it's simple but complex. We will meet the final 2 human needs that I've defined as growth, personal growth, and contributing actual kind of meaningful value in the world.
And why is this a mutually supportive relationship? Like, why would an organization ever want to meet these individual needs?
You can flip it round the other way, which is kind of where I started. And there's some deep organizational thinking history here. These ideas are pinched from Stafford Beer of Management Cybernetics and the Viable Systems Model, and Barry Oshry of Power and Systems and the Organic Systems Framework. They both put their finger on, in very different contexts, Stafford Beer thinking about structure and the dynamics of organization, Barry thinking about human interactions and systemic human dynamics, that an organization needs both stability and homogenization, balanced with differentiation and adaptability, and the sub-elements, the people or the teams or whatever they may be within the organization, need both integration, moderation of behaviors, feeding and supporting each other, and individuation and autonomy to act. And actually, so you need all 4 of those in a dynamic balance at the organizational level to maintain the organization, the basic coherence, but you also need to maintain the dynamism, the adaptability, and all the rest. And there is a tie-in, which I'd love to discuss more with people, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to consider it further. I'm not claiming that I have the full word of God on this. As I say, these are well-supported hypotheses, but the point is, if you need those 4 things, and if humans turn out to need those 4 things, isn't it just logical that you need to create a mesh between the fulfillment of the human needs in the organization and the fulfillment of the organizational needs of the people, if that makes sense?
You're sort of asserting that, in a way, the individual needs kind of add up to this whole. One of the arguments I've heard before is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the more pedantic version of that is that the whole is different than the sum of the parts. What is that difference that can be achieved when we start to view these individual needs in our understandings?
Well, I think it's quite obvious. If we just look at each of those things, if we look at certainty and comfort and homogenization and stability, a group of people can create more homogenization, commonality, and stability than an individual. If we look at uncertainty and variety, the need to meet those and differentiate to be adaptable in the world, then a complex organization can do more adaptation than a single individual can do. The same with love, connection, and belonging. You don't get love and connection, well, perhaps unusually well-adjusted individuals get love and connection from themselves, comes to think of it. Most of us actually tend to get that from a group. And significance and uniqueness, that can be a very isolating, these all have a shadow side, that can be a very isolating dynamic, but actually what significance and uniqueness means is individuation in the face of a collective and being recognized for that individual, what you bring, the specialness that you bring.
Yeah. And so for organizations to start applying these ideas and to actually enable this individual fulfillment of these needs, you identify 5 practices to get there.
Yeah, I consider them to be the fundamental kind of building blocks of creating something other than the sum of the parts, I guess is my favorite version of that, which is a learning system. So if you have honesty and the ability to have honest, productive, deep conversations, speaking the unspeakable, and actually being able to acknowledge the existence of motivation, emotion, psychology, the depths that we usually hide, and also our own limited, partial, situated rationality, all of that should come out in really powerful conversations. Then you've got a chance of building some shared understanding, right? If you don't have honesty, you can't really do a lot else structurally between groups of people. You can't build trust without a degree of honesty. And really important to say, I want to frame all of these as practices, not a declaration, not we have honest conversations here, or we value honesty as one of our, top 17 attributes, but actually things that we actually practice and do. There is nothing so toxic as an environment that declares it's honest, but is truly not. And of course, no organization is completely honest. There's always something that can't be said. Second practice is clarity. We tend to be allergic to clarity in the modern world as treating that as micromanagement. But the fact is that you only get human freedom within known boundaries. You only get work, at least, the exercise of discretion within known boundaries. Very often we set people up for failure in organizations because we don't have the honesty and we're not willing to do the potential difficult work that's involved of creating clarity. So clarity is always a practice and it always goes away and you need to always pull it back. If you have honesty and you have clarity embedded as ongoing practices, then you've got a chance of learning, but you actually need to embed learning practices, preferably triple loop learning practices, thinking about, doing the right thing. Well, you can do all kinds of different levels of learning, but doing the right thing, thinking about your framing for doing the right thing, and thinking about your identity, your purpose in the world. And that refers to building better relationships in learning as well as task focus. And it refers to reflecting on, were we aiming to do the right thing in the right way in the first place?
I think a lot of organizations tend to view these ideas as new ideals to have, which is why I think often they get confused with values. Like we are valuing these things.
Sure.
Very different from practices, as you point out. Practices involve actually doing the work. But if you haven't worked out, your muscles have atrophied, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be very hard to take the first step in the right direction. So I want to shift the conversation towards, how do organizations begin? How do they get started from the present moment towards these practices?
Well, the self-serving thing is bring in expert facilitators who can help you with this at an organizational development level. But what a facilitator will give you, which you can get in various different ways, is the container, the safe space, the context where you're setting up the right cues. Because as soon, in our experience, you talked about muscle atrophy, and that's a good analogy. In our experience, when there hasn't been a lot of honesty, or there's been systematic things not said and the unspoken and even dishonesty, as soon as you breach that topic, boom, you're lighting things on fire. and you are going to get, we use a set of what we call priority intervention levels from a woman called Petrushka Clarkson, really interesting 70s psychologist on team dynamics. She makes the point, you have to address danger, confusion, conflict, deficit, and developments before you can get to productivity. So you expect, the point is, when you introduce honesty practices, There will be some kind of surfacing, flare up, and so on. So you need to simply be prepared to process that appropriately. And it doesn't mean fixing everything or fixing everybody. It means putting in the support necessary to get through things being more honest. And then you move on to like giving people role clarity, and boom, it all kicks off again. And even, I suppose the fundamental point there, Ben, is what makes this manageable is knowing that it might happen and knowing that it's okay that it happens, that you have an intent to stay in relationship with the people that you're with, and that starts to train the brain just that little bit. I don't know if you remember the thing that was very popular quite a few years ago now called rejection therapy, where you had to challenge yourself to get rejected in a safe way, but in a way that mattered a little bit to you every day for 100 days, right? And it was like haggle at the supermarket, ask for a discount at the till, go into your favorite restaurant and ask to be given a tour of the kitchens and things like that. Things that if you got them would be nice, and put yourself out there in the way that your brain knows it's about to get rejected by the tribe, and the programming is that we're going to be outcast and we're going to be eaten by the saber-toothed lion and all of those kind of things. So if you put people in situations where there are tears, or there's confrontation, or people say what they really think unskillfully. So building skill in practice is a really important concept here, but actually part of building skill in practice, just like in judo, learning how to fall, getting knocked down, getting up again, is absolutely critical. Part of skill in practice is knowing that it's safe to try and fail, and that the world doesn't come to an end. You're not outcast, even if you're not very skillful at first, that the conversation and the relationships continue.
I like to say that before you can do something as an ongoing practice every day, you have to at least do it once. And so it sounds like you can help
Nice.
people with their first time doing this kind of thing and starting with these practices.
Yeah, so Red Quadrant and the Public Service Transformation Academy, building the capability to sort of do this work in public services. Red Quadrant can come in and deliver and build the skills as well.
So where can people find you? How can they reach out?
Well, I'm very easily findable on any social media, Ben. I am Antlerboy. There's a mysterious secret to that social media tag, which I won't reveal here. But LinkedIn is a good one that gives a good overview of everything that I do. Otherwise, redquadrant.com or publicservicetransformation.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Benjamin.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.